So today I want to talk about channeling chaos. So we live in a really chaotic world now. The world's changing faster than ever before. And some people try to block it out. Some people they complain about how the world's changing so fast. They can't get stuff done because they're always interrupted. And that's not very successful. And there are other people who learn how to channel it. And it's a little bit like whitewater rafting, where you can complain about how fast the rocks are approaching you and how fast the water is and how difficult it is um, to navigate, or you can figure out how to use the water and use the fast-flowing water to navigate to get to the end and to achieve what you want, both in terms of process and in terms of outcome. So I want to talk to you today. It's a little bit about goal setting, but it's about goal setting in our fast-changing world. So I'm going to start with the poll here. So for the people who haven't done polls before, it's very simple. The poll will come up on your screen now. I haven't started yet because I just want to explain what it's about, and then I'll show the poll. So the question is, it's the start of the year. People are thinking about what they're going to do for this year. And the question I've got for you is, what do the next 12 months have in store for you? And I'd like you to think about it from your professional life and in terms of what you're going to do with your business. And specifically the question I'm asking is, how are you going to generate income in your business? And the way the polls work, there are two kinds of polls. One is where you can just tick one box, and in this one you can tick multiple boxes. So I've got some options here, so let me show you the poll. I'll launch it for you now. And it'll come up on your screen, and you can now choose any one or more of these options. So if you're planning to, if you've got existing products or services and you plan to keep them the same but sell more of them, tick the first box. If you've got products or services that you want to expand or extend, tick that box. If you want to reduce or eliminate some, tick that one. Or if you've got brand new products or services, tick that one. Remember, you can tick more than one because you might be doing all of them. In fact, for me, I'll definitely intend to do the first, the second, the third. So I don't really have any new products or services that I'm thinking of launching, but I do want to add to the existing ones and remove some of those that I'm reducing the priority on. Okay, so most people have voted, so I'm just going to keep the poll open for a few more seconds and then I'll show you the results. Okay, a whole bunch of people have jumped in and voted now. Okay, so let me show the results. So we're up to 88% voted, so that's good enough. So let me just close the poll and I'll show you the results. And by the way, if you have got other, can you please type in the question box what your other is? I'll just read it out. I'll keep it anonymous, but I'll read it out. Okay, let me share the results so you can see what people in the room are saying. Okay, so as you can see, so everyone here is planning to do more with what they've already got. So they've got some existing products and services, and they're going to change their sales and marketing so that they can sell more of them. Great. And also extend the existing products and services and launch new products and services. So very few are planning to reduce or eliminate, which is interesting. There's no right or wrong here. I just think that's interesting. Okay, so let me hide those poll results, and we'll look at how we get to channel chaos. Okay, so a couple of people here. I said I'll keep this anonymous. A whole new brand, which is that's different from the revenue, and I'd be interested in that person looking at, okay, so as a result of that, what does that mean, and whether that means that they're selling more of what they've already got, or whether it means that they're kind of fine-tuning it. Okay, so let's move on to channeling chaos. And in particular, I want to look at some research that the Institute for the Future did, and they looked at future skills, skills for the future workforce. And they came up with a list of 10 things that they recommend that if you're a leader, you should be building these skills in your team. And for everybody, wherever you are and whatever you're doing in work, these are skills that you should look at developing for yourself. So I'm going to share what those 10 skills are, and we're going to focus on one of them for the rest of this webinar. But just as an interesting exercise, I'm going to ask you, if I asked you, what are some skills that you think are essential for the future, what would they be? So, for example, when I ask this question, quite often people say creativity or problem solving. So that's given you two. And what are some of the others? Just type them in the question box, and I'll just read out what people are saying. Innovation, great. Follow-up, Justice says. Project management, Anne says. Delegation, John says. Flexibility and openness, Tricia says. Empathy, yep. Okay, that's a good start. That's a good starting point. Let me show you what the Institute for the Future came up with. Oh, diversity is another one. Okay, so the Institute for the Future came up with this list of 10. Some of you may have seen some of these before. It's been quite popular. I've even seen it on the commercial news stations talking about skills for the future and what you should be teaching your kids. So you may not have come up with these words, but some of them we did. So I think Tricia was the one who said diversity, which is very much about this cross-cultural competency. And Tricia in particular is an expert in cultural intelligence, so that's definitely a valuable skill for the future. I think Tricia was also the person who said empathy, which is exactly what social intelligence is about. And so here are the lists that the Institute for the Future came up with. We're not going to go through all 10 of them today. In fact, all we're going to do is look at one of them. And the one we're going to look at is the one right at the top, which is called cognitive load management. Now, cognitive load management, even though it sounds like a complicated phrase, is really about time management, productivity, managing information overload, managing our fast-changing world. So the fact that things are cognitive, in other words, our brain is getting overloaded. And so how do we learn to manage that? So how do we learn to become like this person here who's a professional who has control of everything or is able to manage everything and so is at peace? Okay, so that's what we're looking at today. So it's like time management and productivity, but now the big difference is that some of the old time management and productivity techniques don't work anymore because we just have so much more flowing our way. Just to give you an idea of how much is flowing, Eric Schmidt, who's a head of Google, the CEO of Google, said this a few years ago, that every 2 days now, we create as much information in 2 days as we did right up from ever since humanity's been around until very recently. And so every 2 days, we're creating huge amounts of information. And if I ask you, so what's your reaction to that? And I'm not going to ask you to share in the question box, but I wonder what your reaction to that is. So you don't need to share it, but if you think about, so what do you think? So we've got this huge amount of information coming our way. So I think the most appropriate response to that is this. So what? So what if you've got so much information? What if he had said every 4 days we create as much? That means there's only half as much information. Or what if he said every year we create as much as we did in as the humanity until now? It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really affect us. All that information doesn't affect us. Only certain amounts of information affect us. So it doesn't matter that we're creating more information than we've ever created than you could ever consume in your lifetime in a day. That doesn't matter because not all of it's relevant. So part of managing your cognitive load is making sure that you get the right information and process it appropriately. So if you want to be like this guy who has obviously managed what's going on in his life, or he's due for a very big shock pretty soon. But assuming that he's got things and he's managing things well, what he's done is chosen the right information, processed it appropriately, and made sure that he can still achieve what he needs using the information that's out there. So we're going to look at how do you get there from here. So in other words, you know where you want to go to, and you've got to figure out how to get there in this fast-moving world. But my point is that rather than feeling overwhelmed by all the information that's out there, figure out how to channel it. So I've talked in the past about the fact that our world has changed and it's become fast, flat, and free. And as a result, the old ways of productivity and goal setting and performance have changed a bit. So the world is faster, which means that there's less time to do things because things have got compressed, and there's more change happening in the world, and change is happening much faster. So you can't set a 12-month goal anymore because by the time that you're 3 months into the goal posts have changed because the environment has changed behind you. The world's got a lot flatter, which means that a lot of the hierarchies and structures have broken down. So there's more information coming our way because we're not protected from it, and there's less structure to process that information. So in the past, you could delegate stuff to your team, and because you had a strong structure, you give a task to your team member, and you know that he or she would go away and perform that task. Nowadays, you might be outsourcing that task to somebody who's doing 5 other jobs at the same time, and they've got to do it within your priorities, but also within their priorities. So there's less structure around. There's not just one place that you can go for information. There's multiple places to choose from, and therefore that makes it harder because now you've got to make a choice rather than having only one choice. And things that used to cost a lot now cost a lot less, and sometimes they're even free, which means that if the products and services that you offer, there's more competition for them because there are more affordable and sometimes even free alternatives. And on the other side of the coin, for you, when you're looking to buy products and services, there's more choice, which you think is a good thing, but it also means that you may spend all your time trying to choose rather than making a choice and going with it. Okay, so that's how the world has changed. So what does it mean for goal setting? Let me ask you, if you're doing goal setting, and many people at this time of the year are setting goals or setting their plans for the year, and if I ask you which of these four areas creates the best goals? So there, you can create vague goals or specific goals. So in other words, you can be specific about your goals, or you can just make them vague. And they can be big or small. So they can be little goals, so small things you want to achieve, or big things you want to achieve. So if you look at those four quadrants, and again, I'm not going to ask you to share, because I think you're pretty clear about which of these four is going to create the best goals. So if you create vague, big goals, so yeah, I want to be fit, then it's a big goal, and I want to be fit by the end of the year. Then it's easy to give up because it's vague. You don't know how to get there, and it's so big that other things get along, life gets in the way, and so you give up on your goal because it's just vague. It's vague, and it's too hard to achieve. A similar thing happens if you've got vague goals that are small, because then you can fool yourself into achieving the goals. So if you say, I want to be fitter, and all you do is you lose a few hundred grams, you go, okay, well, I'm fitter, I've achieved my goal. So you fool yourself into thinking that you've achieved something, when in fact all you've really done may have just been random. It may just be noise rather than actually achieving the goal. And if you choose small specific goals, great, because you're becoming specific now, but small goals aren't very motivational. You can achieve something, but so what? It doesn't really mean a lot. If you decide that you want to increase your revenue for the year by 5% or 10%, it's probably not that hard to do it, but when you do it, are you really going to feel satisfied? So the goals you should really aim for, and the research supports this, is goals that are big and specific. So make your goals specific, but also make them challenging. So Heidi Grant Halverson did some research, and she's written this great book called 9 Things Successful People Do Differently. And one of the 9 things that she talks about, backed by research, is that you should set specific goals which are challenging, because they're stretch goals, and they're specific, so you know where you're heading. So that's what we're looking at today. So set big goals which are specific. Now, everything I've said so far about goal setting is what people have always said. People have often said, if you want to achieve your goals, make sure that you know exactly where you're going for. So specific is the S from SMART goal setting, and also make sure that they're challenging stretch goals so life doesn't get in the way and you're motivated. So what's changed? What's changed is that our world is changing so fast around us. As I said, the environment has changed. So now you're in a boat heading towards your destination, and you've got this goal which motivates you, but the world's changing around you. You're in stormy seas. You don't exactly know where you're going. You have to keep changing course. So the things that used to work don't work anymore. So some of the things that used to work, and not so long ago, so maybe a decade ago or a decade ago, you could do some of these things and they would still work. So you could set a 12-month goal and you'd be pretty confident that you'd be able to, at least in 12 months' time, you'd still think it was a worthwhile goal to aim for. You'd have annual performance reviews with team members because people would say, okay, well, we set your goals for 12 months and at the end of 12 months, let's have a look how you went along with those goals. You could have quiet days. So you could, if you worked in an office or in a busy environment, you could have a quiet working at home day where you go away and get work done during the day without being interrupted. And there was a thing called work-life balance. So there's a work was separate from life, and all you had to do was find the right balance between it. So if you're working too much, you'd withdraw from that and spend more time in your personal life. If you're slacking off too much, maybe you need to do a little bit more work. So you could get out of balance, but you could get back into balance quite quickly and readily. And in fact, about 10 years ago, this was such a novel idea that you could work away from, that you could have these quiet days and have your work away from an office, that I used to do this where every Friday I used to go get out of get out of home and go and work down by the river with my laptop and plug it into an outdoor PowerPoint and work there for every Friday. And it was such a novel idea that this local community newspaper journalist who happened to be walking by, he came and took a photo and wrote up a little article about me because it was such a novel thing at the time. And this is less than 10 years ago that you could do that. But now that just doesn't work anymore because you can't take a quiet day because you're interrupted all the time. 12-month goals don't work because things change within 12 months. Annual performance reviews don't work because people want feedback more regularly. And work-life balance, you just can't separate work from your personal life anymore. So we're now looking at work-life integration. So what do you need to do? So as I said, you need specific goals and big goals, which is good, but you also need flexibility in achieving those goals. So spend less time planning and more time actually doing stuff. And I'll give you some specific advice on how to do that soon. But if you look at the specific and big goals, if you're not flexible, then what you've got are brittle goals. So you may set them, and in January it's easy to set the goals and think, okay, that's great. I now have my plan set out for the next 12 months or even for the next 3 months, but things are going to change. And so they're brittle. They seem solid, but the slightest thing that comes along can break it, like a small rock breaking a windscreen. It's brittle. So what you need is flexibility, because when you have flexibility, you know where you're heading because it's specific. It's something that you're motivated for because it's big, and you're flexible, so you're in flow. It's like that. It's like the whitewater rafting. So you flow and you adapt to the changes, you adapt to the circumstances, rather than just setting your course and sticking to it no matter what big rocks are coming up along the way. So I'm going to share with you 5 ways to increase flow in your life when you set your goals. And we're talking about professional life here, but there's some parallels to your personal life as well. There's some people who will get a bit antsy about not having these last 2 bits of the model filled in, so let me just fill in these last 2 bits. If you've got specific flexible goals, but they're not challenging goals and they're quite bland, and as I said earlier, you yawn because you're not motivated to achieve them. And if they're big goals, but it doesn't matter whether you're flexible or not. If they're not specific, they're too vague. But we're going to look at this area here, which is flow. So how do you get into flow, and how do you make sure that the goals that you've set allow you to work in flow to achieve them? So that's what we're going to look at here. It's a little bit, now this is where we get interactive and practical. So I've done quite a bit of talking now, but here's the time when you actually get to do some stuff. So I hope you're ready to do it, because what I'd like you to do is actually make some notes for yourself. So I'm going to share with you 5 broad strategies for getting into flow and achieving your goals in a chaotic world. And for each of them, I'm going to talk briefly what their strategy is, and then I'm going to give you a minute where I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to give you the chance to write down. I'm going to give you a couple of questions to prompt you, but write down answers for yourself. I'm not going to ask you to share them. I might ask at the end if you've got some great ideas to share them, but this is for yourself, for your plans for the year, and your plans for your professional part of your year. So not necessarily your personal life, but of course it's private, so you can do whatever you like. Okay, so let's look at these 5 strategies, and I hope you're ready to get going. So please have pen and paper or finger and iPad ready, and we'll get going. Okay, so the first one is change your focus from managing time to managing energy, because there's never enough time now to do everything you want to do. So the challenge is making sure that you've got the energy to do the things that are important to you. So what are the things that give you energy? What are the things that drain your energy? And what else can you do to create more energy or do more of the things that give you energy? Okay, so what I'm going to do, so each of these 5 sections, I've got 3 questions for you. The third question is kind of like a what else question, which is just a broad question. The first 2 are kind of going to direct you to specific things. So I've got this little timer that'll start running now, and I'll give you a minute to work on that. So I'll stop talking for the rest of this minute, and then we'll come back and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so I hope you had the chance to give yourself some, get some ideas for yourself, and perhaps come up with some answers to those questions. Remember that as you may notice here, I'm only asking you what gives you energy and what drains you energy, not really looking at strategies yet. So in this short webinar, we don't have time for that. But what I'd like you to do later is then look at how you manage that. So if you came up with something that drains your energy, so draining your energy might be doing something like administration tasks, then what do? You can do less of them because maybe some of them aren't required. You can delegate to somebody else. You maybe need to hire somebody or need to outsource. So you'll find those solutions later. These questions are just to get you started with the thinking. Would anyone like to share how you answered that? Because it might help guide other people for the next 4 questions. I won't ask people to share every time, but I might ask what you're saying here. And you might want to say whether it gives you energy or drains energy, because otherwise I won't know which is which. Okay, I don't have any more for this one, but as we go through for the next 4, oh, here we go, so Anne says something that gives her energy is read something inspiring. John says draining energy is marketing. Yeah, okay, and he's already come for the solutions, which is to outsource and delegate. Yeah, great. That's exactly what we're looking for here, because we're not necessarily going to find the answers here, the solutions, but at least you can identify the direction which you're going to go. Yeah, Justice says achieving stuff that matters gives energy. So maybe for example, for Justice, and I'm not giving Justice coaching here, but maybe one of the things she might do is find things that matter and just do them in small steps so that you get quick wins along the way so that it continues to give her energy towards her goals. Okay, so let's look at the next one. The next one is instead of trying to block what's happening in the world, because you can't block out all the information, be very choosy, filter the sort of information that's relevant to you. So yeah, going back to that Google CEO Eric Schmidt quote, there's no way you can process all the information, but you don't have to. Just be choosy and be ruthlessly eliminate what you don't need. So have a look at what you need and make sure that you're getting that information in a timely way. And then what can you eliminate? Like, do you really need to be on social media all the time? There's an obvious one, but there may be other things, like maybe you're blogging and not getting results from your blog. Maybe you're doing a podcast and you're spending all this time listening to podcasts, and maybe you can remove some of the subscriptions because they're not helping you anymore. Okay, so what do you need? What will you eliminate? And then what else? What else can you do to filter information in a more effective way to help you achieve your goals? Yeah, okay, so Justice says need structures that incorporate my priorities. Yeah, good. Okay, so at least Justice, you've identified that's the first step. I don't just mark email as junk. I unsubscribe where possible. Great, and that's exactly right. So to eliminate stuff, and I use the 80-20 rule. Like if I'm subscribed to a newsletter, and if I'm not getting value from it 80% of the time, so 4 out of 5 newsletters, then I think, well, is it really worthwhile? I might as well just delete it or unsubscribe. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So the next one is spend less time planning stuff and more time launching. So I'm not saying planning's no good at all. You should definitely plan, but don't over-plan. So don't plan things to the nth degree before you launch a project. Create smaller projects, launch them, and see what happens. And so you should still have your goal that you're working towards because you want something that's specific, but instead of planning out the whole big goal, have smaller sub-goals or what I call projects, and launch projects. Launch them regularly and just see what happens. Okay, so here are the 3 questions. So what can you launch fast? So towards your goal. So can you do a little sub-goal that you can launch fast? And the second one, what can you compress? What I mean by that is can you do something in a shorter period of time? Because if you do compress a goal into a shorter period of time, then you really focus on the things that are most important. So if you're writing something, then and you give yourself an hour to write it instead of a day, then you just don't have time to worry about fonts and margins and styles. You just do the writing. Okay, and then what else? All right, so I'll give you a minute to think about things for your own projects. Okay, so Justice says, good questions, but what wall is the ladder against? I think this is like the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. So you can be climbing the ladder faster, but are you is it leaning against the right wall? I think that's what you're talking about, Justice. And that's the point about setting those big specific goals. The big part of that is something that matters to you. And you've already identified that for you, it's really important to do stuff that matters. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So the next one, it's a little bit, it's interesting and it's a little bit contrarian to what some people say. Um, so there's been a big push towards resilience and being able to bounce back from setbacks, and I think there's a mindset that I'd like you to think about. Rather than thinking about setbacks and failures and being able to bounce back from them, I'd rather that you think like a scientist, and all you're doing is a test. You have a hypothesis, you test it, you do an experiment, and then you compare that with the hypothesis. If it doesn't match, then you haven't change your hypothesis and start again. So you don't necessarily think of scientists as being resilient or being able to bounce back from failures, but you often hear of them just doing test after experiment after experiment after experiment. So by all means, be persistent, be determined, have grit, but don't think of everything as something that's success or failure. So what can you test? What can you put out there and test it and see what happens? Is there anything that you can throw out into the world and with the intent that, if it fails, that's good. I've learned something. That means it's a direction that I don't need to go in. Okay, so what are the sort of things that you can do? And I'm talking here, you can see here that the idea is you're trying to work faster. You're trying to get stuff out there faster, not necessarily by working faster, but testing it out in the real world faster. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to think about that. Okay, Anne says she's about to test a vlog, a video log. So it's great, Anne. I'm glad that you're just about to test it. So just put it out there, see what happens. Now, some of these things you may need to leave for a while to get some traction. So you can't necessarily just post one blog post and then say it didn't work, so I'm going to stop it. And by putting it out there sooner rather than later, rather than getting all the technology right, that's great. John says perfecting workshops and materials before ever running one. Yeah, have the idea, run it and get feedback, just do it. Yep, exactly right. And if you're creating any new sort of product or service, which you, especially a service which you're going to deliver later, you can sell it or you can market it and test the market first before you put any work into preparing it. Brilliant. Okay, let's do the last one. So the last one is especially if you're working with a team, but it applies in all our businesses and all organizations because we're all working with teams. They may not be our employees. Change the mindset of working with people from control to trust. So in the old world, where there were structures and hierarchies, it was easy to control people or control what people did. You had a task, you delegated to somebody, they were dedicated on that task, they'd hand it back, you'd be managing them, you'd be responsible for their salary and their performance, and so you could have a high degree of control. You can't work that way anymore. You have trust people, firstly because you may not have that control over them, literally, but secondly because you want to trust them because they are smart, talented people, and if you're trying to control too much, you're taking away opportunities. So who are the people in your team that you need to build up? Because trust doesn't happen immediately. It's not that they're not trustworthy people, it's just that they haven't yet built up the right judgment, or you haven't yet built up your working relationship with them in order to be able to give them some work and trust that they'll do it well, because they may not have the right skills. So who can you build up? And obviously the next step from that is then what are you going to do about that? Who do you need to let go? Are there people who you're spending too much time managing them because they need that control? So and they don't want to build up that relationship, or it's just not their way of working. So do you need to let them go and find somebody else? And then what else? Okay, I'll give you a minute to do that now. Okay, so thank you everyone. Thank you for taking part in that. I hope you got something valuable from that. And so as I said, these are five. The point of doing these five things is to have more flow in your professional life. So as I said, the three things are: have challenging goals that matter to you, make sure they're specific. So just because they're challenging and difficult doesn't mean that you can't make them specific, but also be flexible around achieving them, so that when the world changes around you, which is which it's going to do invariably, then you can be flexible and still get towards your goal without having to give it up, and also without having to downgrade your goal. One of the challenges that happens in our fast-changing world is that people think the world's changing so fast, there's no point me setting a big goal, so let me set a small goal. And it's such a pity, because then they reduce their possibilities for their future. So I think this is the solution. Set goals that are big, make them specific, but be flexible along the way. Any last questions or comments about this before we finish up? So Justice says very valuable. Thank you. I do want to make the point that as we went through this webinar, the webinar was only it's going to be about 40 minutes in total, and we only spent about 10 minutes on those 5 areas. So I hope what I've done for you is opened up your mind with some questions rather than giving you all the answers. The questions I asked were deliberately designed around what can you do rather than how you can do it. So to actually make it reality, you need to figure out then how you're going to make this work. As I said at the start, please complete the exit survey, and I'll send you the ebook about email, which we didn't talk about at all, but it's such a big thing in most people's professional lives that if you get that under control, it just frees up your mind to do other things. The next webinar in the series is coming up on the 2nd of February, and if you're watching this live, then you'll automatically get all the reminders for it. It's about innovation, and it's about thinking differently. It's again going to look at one of the ideas from the Institute for the Future report, but another one. So today we looked at cognitive load management. Next time we're going to look at novel and adaptive thinking. If you're watching the recording of this, then you can go to seeingintothefuture.com and register for the webinar series. It's free, and then you'll get the reminders automatically. I also talk about this in my conference presentations, a keynote presentation. The main one that I do is called Fit for the Future, and then quite often people get me to do a workshop or a breakout session, and the cognitive load management or channeling chaos workshop is one that I offer. So you've seen a little mini glimpse of it here today. If you're interested, you can find out more at gihanspeaks.com. So thank you everyone for coming along to the first webinar for me for this year, and I hope you come along to many more in the future. And I also wish you the best in getting in managing your cognitive load and getting things done this year. Thanks everyone, and bye for now.